state of Arkansas. And Senator, there's a lot of hope hanging on this stimulus measure, this relief bill. I know the White House winces at the stimulus nature of it, but it is expected to stimulate, isn't it?
Well, we hope so, Neil. I think it may be more properly called a survival package, though, for so many American families. Terrible news today that 3.3 million Americans lost their job last week. But let's remember, they lost their job not because their businesses were unsound or they deserved to lose it. They lost their job because a pandemic hit our nation. Just 45, 60 days ago, all those Americans were at work. Their companies were fundamentally solid. We can come back from this, but the American people, whether they're workers or their businesses, need a bridge to get beyond the early days of this crisis. And that's what the package that we passed last night will do. It'll put money in the pockets of distressed families so they can put food on the table for their kids and keep a roof over their houses. And it'll help those small businesses keep their workers on payroll. So in a few weeks, when we get through the worst of this initial wave, businesses can begin to open back up and we can get this economy back on its feet.
How soon do those individuals get these checks? Anywhere from $1,200. It could be north of $2,000 if you're a married couple with kids, et cetera. But how soon will they be able to see them?
Well, there's two different kinds of money that will be coming to distressed families, Neil. The first are the direct tax rebates. So anyone who filed a tax return in 2018 made less than $75,000 a year as an individual, $150,000 as a couple, should see tax rebates, as you say, between $1,200 and a little over $3,000, depending on their family size. We hope by the first or maybe the second week of April. The Secretary of Treasury thinks the IRS can get them out then. But second, for all those Americans who lost their job in the last week or two, unemployment benefits were significantly increased, and that increase will continue through July to make sure that you can get back on your feet, and when the time is right and we can begin to gradually reopen our economy, you can get back to work. So those are two different streams of money that are going to help distressed families in this terrible time.
You know, you talk, Senator, about Americans gradually getting back to work. The president's goal was maybe to start thinking that way around Easter Sunday, 2.5 weeks from now. What do you think of that timeline?
Well, I think we have to make our decisions based on conditions on the ground rather than any specific timeline, especially any national timeline. What's right for New York City may not be right for Kansas City, and it may not be right for Star City, Arkansas. So we'll have to make the decision based at our local and state levels primarily. Remember, the president didn't shut down any part of our economy. The governors and the mayors made decisions based on their local conditions, and those conditions vary across the country. So we need to exercise caution as we gradually get people back into their normal daily routines, because we don't want to see a resurgence of this virus anywhere. But it'll be primarily a decision based on local conditions in the various states. And I suspect what you'd see is a rolling calibrated series, maybe using a stoplight chart system of red, yellow, green, down to the county level.
But again, if the president says, I think it's time for people to come out of their homes, if a governor feels differently, Senator, that in his or her state that's not wise, does the governor, does his or her verdict win out?
Well, in our federal system, the governors and the mayors can have the control over those kind of orders. Because remember, whenever you have restaurants, bars, theaters, gyms closing, those are not decisions of the president. Those are decisions of governors and mayors. Now, they may be using guidance from the Centers of Disease Controls, but those kind of decisions in our federal system are based primarily at the state and local level. Of course, though, those decisions, Neil, are largely just reflecting the reality of this virus. It's not a governor or a mayor who has shut businesses down. At bottom, it is the decisions of Americans reacting to a dangerous virus. That's what stopped our economy. That's what will get our economy moving again when we have the spread of that virus slowed and ultimately arrested.
Any doubts tomorrow the House will get this done?
No, I have no doubts, Neil. We passed this legislation last night 96-0. The Senate can barely even rename a post office 96-0, much less pass a $2 trillion emergency package. So I think it's regrettable that Nancy Pelosi intervened in our bipartisan negotiations last weekend, and now we've lost almost a week's worth of time of getting this desperately needed aid into the hands of America's families and businesses. But I'm confident the House of Representatives will pass it tomorrow, the President will sign it, and then our government will be moving as quickly as possible to get this aid into the hands of families and businesses.
Senator Cotton, great seeing you again. Thank you, sir, very, very much.
Thank you, Neil.